The Iron Giant finally makes a move, attacking the Gorosei and revealing to us for the first time some lore about Joy Boy himself. But with it, there's a massive revelation that confirms to us that the Gorosei may actually be able to survive drowning in water. And there's plenty more to talk about too, such as the meaning of Vegapunk's continued message in this chapter, or the mythical origins of the Iron Giant's name, Emmet. So let's break it all down in this analysis of chapter 11-19. On the cover, we get to see the region of Kibi, which is one of the few regions of Wano we've barely got to see much of in the original story. Kibi is based on the Chugoku Central region of Japan, and is named after the food of the same name, the Kibidango. Unfortunately though, most of Kibi has been turned into a wasteland, and factories still loom in the background as a reminder of its darker days. Yamato, who is crossing through Kibi, is getting harassed by children who held a grudge against Kaido, so it's going to be interesting to see how Yamato is able to turn that around. In the first page, Stussy, who has decided to free Kaku, is now being told by him to leave before Lucci arrives. As they are currently in the control room, we can spot wreckage of things like the command center, which were originally seen since the start of the arc, but more interestingly, behind Kaku's speech bubble, you can actually spot a bunch of plates, scattered food, and even Zoro's bottle of alcohol scattered on the ground, as they are the remainders of all the food that the Straw Hats consumed before leaving the control room. As Luffy transforms into Gear 5th, he exclaims, "Tanoshiku natte kita." This has basically become a trademark line for him in Gear 5th, as he's already mentioned it several times whenever he transforms, translating essentially to, "Now it's getting fun," or "Here comes the fun." Luffy then defends against Mars by transforming into a balloon, much like his Gomu Gomu no Fusen or balloon move, but in this case he applies it more similarly to Gear 4th, Tang Man. This is a good opportunity to bring up the fact that it's been suggested Gear 4th was seemingly an already awakened form of Luffy's fruit, though not awakened at its full potential. For starters, it had the cloud scarf that is iconic to awaken Zoan users, but it also transforms Luffy's body just like a Zoan awakening does. Even Kaido remarked that the way that Luffy used Python during Gear 4th was unlike how his fruit otherwise worked, as it went beyond the properties of rubber by extending itself infinitely. Instead, something like Python better matches Gear 5th, where Luffy's body is instead able to stretch with a lot more freedom and a lot more infinitely. It seems like Gear 4th was only a partial stage of awakening, as Luffy hadn't quite reached his full Nika transformation with white hair, where he becomes much more cartoonish and much freer, but at the very least, seeing him use a move like Tangman this chapter once again suggests that Gear 4th and Gear 5th are more intrinsically connected than people thought. Sanji, Frankie, and Bonnie all fight together towards pushing Mars back through Luffy himself. In this case, Sanji enters Ifrit Jambe again, for which I'd like to comment about its etymology. The original Diable Jambe, which translates to Devil's Leg, uses a kanji reading that reads as Devil Style Leg. This is referring to a specific type of cooking known as Devil Style. In the case of Ifrit Jambe, however, the kanji is changed for Jin Style Leg, which in this case is replacing the devil with Jin, as Ifrit is a Jin, or a devil from Islamic myth. Frankie also uses a new attack, being an improved version of his iconic Strong Right, which he calls Strong Impact Right. The kanji reading reads as Shogeki, the Japanese word for impact, but it's important as it shares the same kanji reading as the impact dial from Skypiea, meaning that Frankie may be trying to replicate its effect. Speaking of Bonnie's attack as well, she calls her version of Gear 3rd Extra Large Nika Punch, being a pun in Japanese as extra large servings for meals, given her obsession with food. In this case, we can also see she's charging it with Armament Haki, confirming her as an Armament Haki user for the first time, which is incredibly impressive considering that she's only 12 years old. Luffy claims that you guys are using Haki, but I wonder if he's just generalizing or if that includes Frankie as well, even if he technically should be to be causing Luffy any impact and not be bouncing back. Luffy then propels Mars back with an attack called Dawn Balloon, with the kanji reading being White Fusen, or the Japanese word for balloon that he uses for his iconic basic version of the attack, Gomu Gomu no Fusen. Mars is then sent flying into the sky and literally becomes a twinkle in the stars, as if he was Team Rocket getting blasted off just like in a cartoon. As they prepare to escape, Atlas states that she must go and do something, given how York is still sinking with their brains. But while she doesn't specify what exactly that may be, this might simply be to check that the others are alright, flying towards the lab of Face in her jetpack to see how the situation is like. Still, this doesn't bode well, as it seems to indicate that only one punk may survive in the end, and at this rate, that may just be Lilith left. left. However, surprise, as the Iron Giant reaches the seafloor and stabilizes itself, the transmission Denden Mushi begins communicating again. With it, we get a few reactions across the world. First is Whole Cake Island, in the middle of Sweet City, with the Whole Cake Chateau partially visible in the background. The screen itself is also made of candy canes. We see several Charlottes reacting, including of course Charlotte Katakuri, but also 32nd Son Charlotte Brownie, 60th Son and Minister of Gelato Charlotte Moscato, 31st Son and Minister of Tasting Charlotte Mobile, 28th Son and Minister of Seeds Charlotte Kato, 11th Son and Minister of Alcohol Charlotte Zucotto, and 9th Daughter and Minister of Meringue Charlotte Broyer, who actually happens to be Brulee's younger twin, who unlike her clearly got the better looks, making for quite the interesting dichotomy of witch and princess. Speaking of Katakuri, an important thing to keep in mind about him is that now that Big Mom is seemingly dead, he is the heir to the throne of Tottoland. There was a chapter during Wano where the Charlottes argued if either Katakuri should rule due to his respect within the family, or if Perospero should rule due to being the first son, like in a monarchical succession. But since Perospero should be dead as well, the throne falls directly onto Katakuri, which makes sense as Tottoland still needs a ruler, and perhaps under Katakuri's own command, the nation could see an even more prosperous and peaceful future without many of the problems that Big Mom brought. Beyond them, we also get to see Gaimon and Sarfunkel on Brer Animal Island, alongside their animal friends, Kokox and Usagihebi, though they don't seem to be aware of the call, as they likely wouldn't have a Denden Mushi. This is likely intended, as in the same panel, Vegapunk exclaims, "I pray that, at any costs, this message can be delivered," which in this case, it isn't being delivered to them, even if they likely aren't the target audience here. So as Vegapunk's message continue, here is where he picks off. "Because there is no such thing. You could call it a will that has been continuously inherited. I pray that, at any costs, this message can be delivered to they who have been led around by that very reason." Obviously, this message is quite vague, as we do not quite possess the context of what he said beforehand. We don't know what he meant that there is no such thing, as it seems something separate from what he says later. However, he refers to inherited will, and that he hopes that whoever has been led by that reason, similarly that of inherited will be able to listen to this message. This seems to further reinforce what we talked about last chapter, that Vegapunk's message seems to refer to there being another Joy Boy or something like that, particularly as he appeared to refer to there being another someone in the D clan, and is seemingly referring to a new Joy Boy having appeared, which in this case has been the result of being led by this inherited will, which would line up with Vegapunk's message here, specifically referring to the will of D, and how that has influenced the new Joy Boy, Monkey D. Luffy. However, as our heroes attempt to escape, Peter throws a bunch of buildings and Cypher Pole members down like a fountain, continuing on from where we saw him previously sucking them up. This also means that the Seraphim might drop in the proximity with the Straw Hats, once again causing potential trouble if they are freed. Suddenly though, Workery jumps towards the ship and leaps into the ocean. You may not realize it, but this is in itself a massive plot twist, because here we have what is supposedly a devil fruit user willingly jumping into the water of the ocean itself. I obviously don't think that Workery is just tossing his life away just to be able to hit them, so why is he willing to jump into the water just to stop the ship? And really, the Gorosei seem to be able to regenerate endlessly, but can they survive drowning in this case, devil fruit or not? The thing is, we have to keep in mind that the Gorosei are not traditional devil fruit users. In fact, they don't seem to be fruit users at all, but devils of their own entirely. And we already know they kinda break the rules of devil fruits in several ways. So what if the Gorosei can even somehow survive and move in water itself? After all, it's been implied in so many ways that Imu may be the incarnation of the sea itself, the mother of nature, Umi, and it's also been implied that the Gorosei could be extensions of Imu's own powers. So if Imu is perhaps immune to water itself as part of his powers, then maybe the Gorosei are similarly also immune to drowning and are able to survive in the water. We can't say for sure, maybe Workery is capable of using Geppo or Moonwalk just like Nasujuro and would just hop back to land, or there is some other reasoning, but it just seems too otherwise reckless for Workery to be willing to jump into the sea, and it seems too clear of a hint by Oda to not mean anything. And if they really cannot be drowned, then truly the possibilities for killing them for good really do seem just about impossible. However, before Warcry is able to smash the ship, from beneath it appears the Iron Giant to deliver a good punch, which actually shatters one of Warcry's horns, though not like that will matter since it can regenerate it anyway. The Iron Giant likely got up by using the jetpack on its back. Since the Vega Force was modeled after the Iron Giant, it makes sense that it too can fly using the jetpack. In fact, we even saw it flying around underwater thanks to this jetpack, which is what Shaka assumed the original Iron Giant used to scale the red line to begin with. We are getting a veritable mecha versus kaiju fight in one piece, and Luffy is similarly fascinated by it. As the editor's note comments, romance is back on the road, referring to how seeing a giant robot fighting is any man's romance, or more accurately translated, any man's dream. What is more interesting, however, is that the Iron Giant appears to have an inner dialogue as a memory. It exclaims, "Joy boy." The interesting here is that Luffy seems to react to the Iron Giant. To be fair, he could be simply using his observation haki or future sight, but in this case, I wonder if Luffy could actually hear the giant's own voice calling out to him through the voice of all things, or if I am reading too much into this. But the Iron Giant follows this inner dialogue by recalling a memory with none other than Joy Boy, being the first time that we ever hear the voice of Joy Boy, and likely will in the anime some year and a half from now. Joy Boy simply tells the Iron Giant, "Ika emeto, izatte toki da." In the first half, we get an actual name for the Iron Giant, being Emmet. In Japanese, it's pronounced as Emeto, but it may be written as Emmet with an H, as that name bears particular importance. This is because in Hebrew myth, the word Emmet is the command word that was used to give life to golems, the large animated creatures of mythology, which are quite similar to the Iron Giant in design and general existence, as the Iron Giant was also likely created by man, just like a golem. The word Emet itself refers to in Hebrew as the universal truth, which makes one wonder about the truths that hide within Joy Boy's story and within the Iron Giant's memories itself. But in his second line, Joy Boy claims "Izatte toki da," a line that the robot repeats, "Izatte toki da," which is a Japanese expression that refers to the hour of need, or the critical moment, so in the hour of need ... It's unclear if Joy Boy is referring to a moment from the past that already happened, or if it was advising the Iron Giant about a moment in the far future it will have to await. But given the context, it would almost seem rather like he was referring about the present, as Emmet seems to be recalling this memory due to the situation that involves it right now. At the very least, Joy Boy is making it clear that at some point a critical hour will appear, and at that point Emmet itself might be needed to do its part and help bring a change in the world to lead it towards its dawn. And perhaps, who knows, that moment might even be right now.